One arrow. One knock on the door of the gods. They had no idea if anyone would answer. The beacon was a door. Lear had established that. What none of them had established, what no soul in the Meridian had managed in 300 years, was whether the door opened from this side. He was not certain it would let them through. He said it plainly, without softening it. The feather was from a Luminarch, or close enough that the distinction may not matter. But carrying a Luminarch's feather was not the same as having permission. A key and a lock are not the same object. He did not know if this was a key. He did not know what the lock looked like from the other side. What he knew, the feather was attached to an arrowhead. That was not chance. The beacon connected this plane to whatever lay beyond it. A Luminarch's feather aimed at the point of connection was not an attack. It was an introduction. He said, "I think this is how you knock on the front door. Not enter. Knock." He said, "We need the rooftop of the palace. We need the feather to reach the beacon, and we need to give it every advantage we can." The quartet forged a plan in the dark, without knowing what awaited on the other side of it. This was not new to them. Since Aurelia's rest, their path had been built on incomplete knowledge, and the particular resolve of people who had learned that waiting for certainty was its own kind of surrender. They had burned sovereigns. They had walked into Moria's chamber. They had taken a pretender off a borrowed throne. Incomplete knowledge was not an obstacle. It was the terrain. The plan had 3 problems. The first was distance. The beacon burned at the apex of the palace spire, the highest point in Sol-Vara, above everything the city had built around it for 3 centuries. Even from the rooftop, the gap between a hand and that point of light was not a gap a body could simply reach across. The second was the arrow itself. A plain shaft would not carry what needed to be carried. The feather and the arrowhead were the mechanism, but mechanism required the arrow to be worthy of what it bore. The wood mattered. The craft mattered. A thing built for an ordinary purpose would fail an extraordinary one. The third problem was getting Valory close enough. Tharok solved the third problem. He did not offer it. He stated it, the way Renarchans state things that are already decided. He could throw her. The arc of a Renarchan's throw combined with the arc of a well-loosed arrow was, by his calculation, the distance they needed. Valory looked at him. Then she said yes. They found the artificer the next morning, 2 streets from the palace district. A craftsman who asked no questions about purpose, not from indifference, but from the professional understanding that his work was the making and the rest belonged to whoever held it when it was done. He turned the arrowhead over in his hands. He looked at the feather without touching it. He named what he needed. A specific wood. Dense-grained, the kind that holds an enchantment without splitting under the pressure of bearing it. They found it before midday. He worked through the afternoon without speaking. When he set the arrow down, it looked almost unchanged. Almost. Something lived in the grain now that had not been there before. Not a glow. Nothing so obvious. The quiet alteration of a thing that has been made ready for something it was not made for. He handed it to Valory. He would take no coin. Sol-Vara was finding its footing again, and he was part of that finding. A craftsman in a city that had been robbed of 3 years of craft. What they had done to the man on the throne had given him his workshop back. That was payment enough. He said so, and went back to his bench. They reached the rooftop before the city woke. The dark was still thick at the edges of the sky. The beacon burned above them as it had always burned, patient, indifferent, neither welcoming nor warning. For hundreds of years of a light above a world that had spent most of those years not understanding what it was. Tharok took his position. Valory took hers, in his hands, weight settled, bow drawn, the enchanted arrow already nocked. Odder positions than this had demanded an arrow from her before. She told herself so, and found she believed it. Lear stood at the far edge of the roof and did not move. His eyes were on the beacon. His hands were still. Calister held the sealed case and watched the sky above them. Tharok threw. The arc was clean. The geometry of a body built for exactly this, releasing at exactly the right moment. Valory loosed at the apex, the arrow leaving her fingers at the precise junction of his throw and her draw, the two forces becoming one. The enchanted arrow climbed. The golden feather caught the light and held it. The arrow did not stop. It did not slow. It rose into the glow of the beacon and vanished, swallowed by 300 years of light, as though it had always been meant to go there. The rooftop held its breath. Below them, Sol-Vara stirred in the early dark, hearth fires catching. The first voices of a city that had remembered how to begin its mornings. The beacon burned on above all of it, vast and silent, the same as it had been the morning before and the morning before that, and every morning stretching back to when the first stone of this city was laid in its shadow. The quartet stood on the roof and waited. Nothing answered. Nothing refused. The silence that followed was not the silence of nothing happening. It was the silence of something that had received a message and had not yet decided what to do with it. The archives are now closed.